How's everybody doing tonight? Good. Great. Well, there's some new faces in here. We'll get started. Good evening, everybody. We've got a very special JBoss tonight, and I know there's probably some new faces in here. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Eric Wallen. I am one of the co-founders of Shadowsoft. We're also the organizer for the JBug. We founded JBug about 2 years ago. We're an open source integrator, and about 6 months ago we had a meeting with Jim Whitehurst, and I had the idea to really kind of pour gas on growing the JBug down here and enabling the community. So he's agreed to come tonight and talk about open source innovation at Red Hat and the JBoss middleware stack. So we're extremely excited to have him here tonight. So without further ado,
It's great to be here. I have a chance to spend a little while with you. Yeah, this is home for me. I'm from Atlanta, lived here a lot of years. I was Chief Operating Officer at Delta Airlines for a lot of years, so I probably lost your bags at some point. So I'm sorry about that, but it's great to come home and have a chance to spend a little bit of time with you. All right, so a couple just ground rules off the bat. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. This is really, I have maybe 20 minutes of stuff to say. If you don't want to hear that, tell me you want to hear it. We'll talk about other stuff, and really here to answer whatever questions that you have. Because I think we have a little over an hour, and I'd really like to use it however you want to use it. So whatever you want to talk about. I'm very good at saying, well, I can't tell you that, and here's why I can't tell you. I used to have 10,000 pilots working for me, and anybody who knows what airline pilots are like, you cannot offend me, I promise. I literally had a guy ask me one time, why are you such an idiot? And how do you intelligently answer that question? So, no, and also, and many people think that, I'm sure, Red Hat, but so seriously, so I'm, you know, I want to talk about a few things, but I really want to just be able to spend the time, answer whatever's interesting to you. The other thing I will say is, I guarantee you're going to have some questions that I can't answer, and I hate that. My email, but I have people who can answer them, I'm sure. So if you have a question that I can't answer, or if you have a question that for some reason you don't want to ask here, my email address is jim@redhat.com. Feel free to email me, question, comment, whatever, and I will admit sometimes it can take me a week or two because I get a lot of email, but I will get back to you, and I'll get back to you with an answer. So a couple of ground rules up front. I'm really excited to be here. You know, the cool thing about what we do, when I say we, I mean all of us do, and what we're doing with JBoss is, it really is kind of a bit of a mission, right? I mean, it's kind of a groundswell, bottom-up kind of mission. And it is code contributors, it is developers using the product, it's people, you know, offering help to others, right? So it's always a we. It's not I don't feel like a vendor. Right, it's kind of a we, right? Kind of we're all in this together. I mean, how many of you guys are actually paying customers of Red Hat JBoss? So a few, and that's cool. It's great that some people are paying us because we've got to pay the bills, but it's great that we have a passionate group of users who are using the product, working with us, but that's what makes the thing work. Right, so I always love doing this because it's just great to get together and we're kind of all in this together, building something really quite special and quite impactful, you know, when you look at where it is. Just some statistics. I don't even know if these are public statistics. None of you are reporters, are you? I'm not sure how many of these are public, but you know, I never know what I can and can't say, so I err on the side of saying more. So 40% of the Fortune 500 are actually paying JBoss customers. So globally, 40% of the largest companies in the world actually do pay for JBoss. By several analyst studies, JBoss, in terms of the application server, is the most used application server in the world. Most of that's unpaid, which is an issue. We'll get to that. But you know, if you think about what's been created, really in a little over 10 years, I mean, think about that. I mean, that's extraordinary. We have very large companies. So, I mean, get more conservative than this. German insurance company. Right? Allianz is a very, very large, completely standardized, not only on the application server, but on the entire JBoss portfolio. Barclays, British, very, very large bank. Here, people like Sprint in Japan, NTT. These are massive users of the entire portfolio. So when you think about, you know, what's been accomplished by a bunch of folks kind of getting together and having this emerge up, and the impact that it's had, it's really extraordinary. You know, a lot of times when people think about open source, you know, Linux, of course, gets a lot of play because it was the first. But if you look at the relative growth and where JBoss is and how impactful it is because it's so much closer to the developer and ultimately to the business logic, I mean, it's extraordinary to see. And so it's great to have you guys all, you know, kind of a part of that, because it really is. I mean, it's something that we're all in together, and you know, we play a role in kind of what we do around the business model. But it really is kind of an incredible effort to just watch this thing emerge and continue to grow and grow and grow. I have a few notes because there are a few things I want to make sure I hit. But again, as we go through, this is really time for me to answer whatever's on your mind. Right, this whole thing is trying to cycle something. All right. Let me, I guess, let's spend just a minute, just kind of perspective. Again, this is kind of users around the world. And one of the other things that really excites me, and again, feel free to interrupt me through any of this. One of the most amazing things that we see about open source, and it's kind of the thing that hopefully you all see, but people who haven't been involved, they think it's all about price. It's like, well, the stuff's free, right? And isn't that great? Stuff's free. What I find amazing is what I think of as reasonable sized customers, free or even price is rarely in the top 5 things that they talk about, which I think is awesome, right? So well, what is it? It's not about price. What is it? So first off, the thing we hear about is developer efficiency, right? It is, you know, people feel like they can, these are big, large companies that invest a lot of money in testing and trying, see significantly better efficiency using JBoss versus using not only the traditional kind of WebSpheres and WebLogics, and you know, for a lot of the big companies, it's WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss. They'll do their own internal studies, they hire people to do studies, just see significant efficiency around that. But even this, I know it's not a public reference, so just don't tweet it. I'll have you cut it. You know, PayPal, big user, and they'll say, what we like about it is it's easy to find people who know JBoss, and we had our really cool stack that we loved, but it was our own thing, and we added some tweaks to it. They said it would take about 4 months to get a developer really up to speed to be productive in their environment. So yeah, maybe there's some things slightly better for their environment by completely tailoring to what they wanted, but they then say you lose so much time in development productivity, and frankly, if you're on the West Coast in Silicon Valley and the speed of turnover there, by the time you get somebody up to speed, they're already leaving. And so just literally develop the productivity, whether that's against the big incumbents or against kind of the hodgepodge thing that a lot of the Web 2.0 companies put together, is without a doubt the #1 thing we hear companies talk about, which is awesome. Number 2 is just the lighter weight footprint. One of our largest JBoss deals ever. This is a Fortune, I know they're a Fortune 20 company. I think they're a Fortune 10 company. So one of the largest companies in the world. We went through all this stuff. You know, it was stay with WebLogic, switch to JBoss, and you know they beat the crap out of us on price. They had a huge vendor management area and purchasing and all these people. We finally got to a deal, and they decided to go with JBoss. And afterwards, I was talking to the CTO, and he said, "You know, Jim, it really didn't matter what your price was. And to be honest, it didn't even matter what Oracle's price was. If you look at the amount of infrastructure required to run our application portfolio, and this is a massive application portfolio, to look, it's a huge company, to run that application portfolio on WebLogic versus JBoss, it was night and day. So it was so much smaller footprint. And then when you say smaller footprint, fewer servers, fewer everything else that goes on it, from operating systems to databases across that amount of space, number of people it takes to run that infrastructure. He said, you know, it was completely irrelevant. Their cost and your cost. It was just, when you overall look at the value of having a lighter weight, modular, more modern architecture to run a portfolio of job applications, so it's just night and day. So that great number 2 that we hear, I'm generalizing these, so it's not just from that, but you hear kind of across the board. The other is just that ease of consumption, right? I mean, hopefully all of you that are non-paying customers ultimately one day will be. but why do you use it? It's easy to get, right? It's easy to get. You can go, you can download it, you can use it, easy to get. And so that's, which is great, right? I mean, and part of the power of the model is the ubiquity that we're able to get by the fact that it's open, it's out there, it's easy to get, it's easy to find people who are willing to proactively help each other, right? You can go to forums, all kind of vehicles to get support. That's important, right? That gets people used to it, comfortable with it, incredible to see it. I think more recently, we now finally have a set of partners. I'll look over here, our partners here. Shout us up, but broadly, a set of partners around the world that are capable of working with customers, both doing new development as well as doing migrations from Web through WebLogic into traditional infrastructure. That's actually been, at least for Red Hat, a core strategy of ours over the last 2 years. It's one of the more difficult things I have to deal with as analysts. We're a public company because we've very much said that we want to work with our partners, not do a lot of that ourselves. So we've worked to grow our services at single-digit rates and our subscriptions at double-digit rates, and really look for our partners to kind of fill in and kind of drive that demand for us. And so we have wonderful services ourselves. I won't say we don't, but we really do rely on our partners to be able to bring both the customer relationships, but also just the business knowledge of being able to drive these solutions through. And as we've been able to build that out over time, all of a sudden it's not just about a technology, it's about, okay, I see a whole support ecosystem. I can hire people who are understand, trained, know the stack. I can find partners who can help support me. The technology's been proven over and over and over again. You kind of put that together for traditional enterprise, those are kind of as important, if not more important, than the technical features of the product. And you kind of put that together, we've kind of reached this inflection point where for new workloads, for so many of our customers now, it's like a no-brainer. The new workloads are going to go on JBoss. The question is, when and how and if we migrate the older stuff, right? Which is incredible. It's we hire people from Oracle and IBM all the time, and they'll all say that they never see each other as a competitor because nobody goes from WebSphere to WebLogic or WebLogic to WebSphere, right? You either stay with what you have or you move to JBoss. Well, with the natural amount of churn, that's generally good to us because almost nobody goes from JBoss to one of the others. So it's just kind of part of an overall momentum, which is great to see, which again, for a relatively new technology to be where it is, 40% of the global Fortune 500 are actually paying customers, and obviously a lot larger percentage have JBoss in their infrastructure, is pretty amazing. I want to spend a little while on the naming and the rationale around the naming. Is that worth spending a little bit of time on? Like, where did this wildfly thing come from? I'm asking, is that something? Should I spend a few minutes talking a little bit about that? Okay, let me, and I'm going to go way back for starters around that. So Red Hat bought JBoss about 6 years ago. Red Hat has I should say we don't, like, when you're talking about yourself, Jim thinks that. No, sorry. So we, Red Hat, and we are passionate about our business model. And so Red Hat's business model is recognizing the power of the open source development model to develop phenomenal code, to be able to eradicate bugs quickly, add features and functionality. For the collaborative model, we're all in, everything we do is in open source. But we also believe, and this was a big, I won't say internal debate, especially with the JBoss folks when we bought them, we also believe in the value of freezing the spec and creating enterprise. Still all open source, but enterprise versions that we support for a long time. So, because we believe that it is very difficult to ultimately offer true deep SLA level support on top of code that is changing relatively rapidly. So our business model is we have this innovation in our open source projects, and depending on the project, every kind of 1 to 3 years, depending on the maturity of the project, we freeze the spec, we move a set of bits over, and we commit to supporting those for, depending on the project, anywhere from 5 to 10 years, right? And so that's kind of our model. And we think that's important. But by the way, it's a very expensive model. It's much cheaper to offer support on top of a set of bits that are just there. When we freeze a set of bits and move them over, recognize every time that there's an upstream change that affects the older version, we have to patch the older versions, right? And so it's a huge amount of work to do that. But for most enterprises, if you're going to spend a lot of money writing applications that sit on infrastructure, you don't want to have to worry about breaking that application every time there's an update to the infrastructure. So it's an expensive model, but we feel like it's the only way to truly guarantee the type of reliability. And I'll use a JBoss example. Since this was a fiasco, I won't use the company's name. A very, very, very large maker of movies, who is a very, very big customer of Red Hat's, decided to use JBoss to build a whole set of web properties around one of the movies. And they made animated movies that kids watch. And this is a huge customer of ours, I mean, many millions of dollars. I'm on a first name basis with the CEO, who's somebody you've all heard of. I mean, this is like big, 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 one of our most important customers. So they use JBoss, they build this website, a whole set of applications and things on JBoss for one of the movies. Movie goes live. Tons of kids show up, the site falls over. So the CEO calls me yelling about it. Of course, I call my head of engineering and start yelling at him about it, and he calls me back an hour later and says, that's interesting because they're not a JBoss customer. Shame on the salesperson. So, it takes millions of literally about 18 million processor hours to render a 3D animated movie. So this is a huge, huge Linux customer for us. Their developer shop just went and downloaded JBoss, built this set of applications, did all their testing, everything worked fine. But when all of a sudden they ran it at extreme scale, it fell over. Now, it was irrelevant that they weren't a paying customer on JBoss because they were a big, important customer. So it's like all hands on deck to get this thing up and going. Still took us almost a week to get it fully up and stabilized. Why? The pieces were never meant, we never tested them at scale. We had never just kind of done the engineering required to take kind of a set of functionality and really make it into what we think of as kind of an enterprise thing, where we've done all of those extreme testings at scale with different configurations, with different other third-party components and all the things that go into what we do when we productize. So we were passionate about that, our model. So we ultimately got them on the enterprise version and they're fine, but just that's a use case to say that we believe that our model, and this is around business model, this has nothing to do with good, bad, and right, wrong, and open source, that there's a need for stability to offer true enterprise level support for running production applications. Our belief, a lot of people will use JBoss.org, but that is our belief and that is our business model. So the problem is that was not JBoss's. The original JBoss, before Red Hat acquired them, their business model was we have a release and we offer support, professional services and support against that set of bits. So there was only one set of bits that was JBoss. When we bought it, we created our model where we create the enterprise version. Well, in the same way we have Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Linux being the important brand, we'll pay $400 million for the JBoss brand, we need to use that brand, so we created JBoss.com, right? The JBoss Enterprise Edition. But JBoss.org still existed. So you had JBoss.org and you had JBoss Enterprise Edition. That's confusing because everybody just says JBoss, right? Nobody says enterpriseedition.org. So there was confusion about what bits people were talking about. We also, because the JBoss brand is so strong, we just started to call all our other middleware things that we decided to build a portfolio over time JBoss. So, all of a sudden you have the JBoss SOA platform and the JBoss portal. So all of a sudden it became both a umbrella brand for our middleware products, but it's also the name of the application server, right? And so, so you had both the confusion of both the .org community and the Enterprise Edition, and it was the portfolio brand that we felt like we had to work out. And then frankly, commercially, not so much in the US, but a lot in Asia and some other places, companies will start to offer JBoss support. Now, what JBoss support is on JBoss.org, but people say, well, I have supported JBoss. XYZ is providing me JBoss support. Well, that's different than the enterprise because the bits are different. So we decided we just had to, at some point, make that clear. So we went through a process with the community to rename it. And of course, the debate was, do you keep the JBoss name for the community? And do a new brand for the enterprise, or do you keep the JBoss brand for the enterprise? And in all honesty, the accountants got involved and they said, you know, what goodwill we have on our balance sheet for buying the JBoss brand, and the kind of write-off we'd have to take if we said we weren't going to use the brand for a commercial product. So we decided to keep the JBoss brand for the enterprise edition, and then we kind of got the community involved and we ran a contest. By the way, factoids, the final 3 names, number 3 was J Beret. Number 2, I think we got it. Number 2, Base Camp, which I thought wasn't bad, you know, kind of. And number 1, Wildfly. So that's, but anyway, so that was the rationale. Sorry to go back through all the detail about the business model, but the fact that we do have .org bits and enterprise bits, and the need to keep those names different is ultimately the reason we decided we had to have separate names. And I think there's still people in Red Hat who don't like necessarily that we always have to do the enterprise versions versus the other. And it's a very expensive model, so we can't just say, ooh, let's offer a product in XYZ, because as soon as you commit to supporting something for 10 years and putting engineering resources, coming out with a new product, you can't just say, ooh, I'm gonna try supporting this and seeing how it works. You're committing to millions of dollars every time we put a product out. So it's not like, so our model isn't necessarily the easiest model, but we still think ultimately it's the right model. But anyway, so that's, I'm happy to have a debate about that too, but that's kind of the rationale around how we got around to the name.
I'm curious though, whenever we see it with companies like with Oracle, when suddenly they became the implicit owners of Hudson, and then it became Hudson and Jenkins, right? Version 001 is exactly equivalent, and then they diverge. What kind of plan does Red Hat have? Do you intend to still be like the single largest contributor to Wildfly in order to get those sort of bleeding edge features that community contributions are dealing with back into the main product line?
Well, no, this is absolutely, this is, they're not separate code bases. Well, they are not meant to be separate code bases. They cannot diverge, because the whole point of the model is just depending on the project, every 2 to 3 years, so it's called 2 years, we say we're freezing the spec. This marches forward, and it's just 2 years later we freeze the spec at the next one, and 2 years later we freeze the spec at the next one. So the same thing we do with Linux, right? And our best, like our Goldman Sachs of the world, who, you know, for trading platforms, they care a lot about Linux. They're deeply involved in Fedora, which is they have tons of developers actually working on it, because they know what they put in Fedora will be in our next version of RHEL. And so the model is the same. It's really nothing more than a name change. The model that we've had will continue to march forward as has been. We're passionate. Everything goes upstream. Everything goes upstream. We do nothing that's not upstream, and we do not get involved in communities where we're not a major contributor. Cool. Which I think is also, I think that's just kind of an important statement. We do not commercialize products where we're not a major contributor. We don't feel like you can faithfully do that if you're not giving back as much to the community as you're getting back out of it. So it's literally just a brand name, so frankly, some of the systems integrators in Asia can't say, hey, we're offering JBoss support, because now they can offer Wildfly, but right. It's clear that there's that distinction there. So that's a little bit on the name. I do want to talk about, though, one of the, I think, the issues with our model. I'm being completely kind of open kimono here. So, so the Red Hat model I've talked about has been, so you have the community version, and then you have the enterprise version. So, and that model's worked very, very well for us, right? And we're $1.5 billion in revenue this year, so it's worked okay. One thing, a subtlety that I don't even think we fully realize, and we use Linux as the example because that's where we got started. There actually is a third thing out there, which in Linux is called CentOS. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So it is a rebuild of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So Fedora is the fast-moving, continues to change our community edition, and then we freeze the spec every couple of years. Well, the community's gotten together, which we actually work with. We talk to them all the time. We make sure we sync up to make it easy for them to get their releases out. There's a group that creates an enterprise version, so they basically take our bits, strip out our service marks, and put out a free as in beer, version of Linux, which turns out to be kind of an important component in the system because a lot of people want to do dev and test and not pay for it and then put it in production. Well, if you do that on Fedora, it's kind of a different code base. So one of the things we started to do, I think we have it out for 3 or 4 of our products, and we will have it out for all of them, is free binaries of the enterprise products. Like right now, or historically until very recently, you actually had to go to get an eval to get the enterprise product. So you could either have to go get an eval to get the enterprise product or use the community version. And if you're in a situation where you wanted to ultimately potentially screw around, play with it, but ultimately put something in production where you might want that support, if you built it on the free thing, the community, you almost had to port it to get it to work on the enterprise. So we're not creating a third thing because that'd be so confusing the way kind of CentOS exists now. But what we are doing is making the binaries of the enterprise versions available for developers to be able to use.
So are you competing with CentOS, or are you working with collaborating?
Well, no, this is for JBoss. I'm sorry, this is for JBoss.
Oh.
So the enterprise versions of JBoss will be up.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for CentOS, I would say we can, we don't have a free version like that, the same thing for RHEL because CentOS exists. So
Right.
I would say we cooperate heavily with the CentOS guys all the time. And so we're kind of doing that. So for you as developers, if you want access to the enterprise bits without having to sign up and give out, eval and all the crap you have to do that, those will be available. I think they're out now for the application server, for Fuse, for ActiveMQ, and I think there's amazing amounts of legal traps you have to go through before you release anything. So we're working our way through that stuff.
But it's for pure development, no. Like I can't use it for like running an internal test server and things like that, right?
I honestly don't know the details. I can get back to you on it. It probably is for pure development only, is my guess, but I wouldn't swear to that.
So that's why the legal agreement.
Okay.
So that would imply like a dual license on the binaries versus the actual source if you were to download it. And
Yeah, well, I think the way it works is the license it isn't like it's the subscription agreement that allows you to get it, says you won't use it for. So that gets to be apparently for the lawyers, and I'm not a lawyer, the subtlety between a subscription agreement and a license is major in their mind. But yeah, my understanding is the agreement that you sign to get the updated bit stream and all the stuff that comes with a subscription for the developer does prohibit you from using it in production. What we define as production, I honestly don't know. But feedback around that is helpful.
it'd be awesome to see OpenShift in that model. And right now, the procedure to get and run OpenShift is it's based off
on-premise OpenShift?
right. It's
Okay.
essentially it's based off of a live CD component. I know the Fedora guys are working pretty hard on getting it pulled in, but to actually get the Red Hat OpenShift pulled down and running is none too easy, depending on your level of expertise.
Okay, I'll take that back. That's good feedback. I never thought about a lot of people wanting to do that, but it makes sense, right?
It
Well, it's
opens
like-
up a lot
yeah.
more to your purview, right? To your market. You're not just a JBoss app server company. I mean, this is the JBoss user group, right? That you have this infrastructure in that you deploy servers, you deploy, message buses and routers, whether they're Java based or not. But those are all infrastructure level components. And then there's this app server. OpenShift represents an ability for community created cartridges or on-premise corporate created cartridges to plug in and run things like to compete with the pace that the community develops with things like Node.js app servers or Meteor-based things or Lua Git on top of Nginx. It's really fast and bleeding edge stuff that might be really useful for things that are taking extreme traffic loads.
Okay. Let me take that back. That's good feedback. I think we're going to try to do that across the portfolio, and I don't know what the timing issue would be around it. Interesting. I did the whole ubiquity thing. I mean, bluntly, it's a core part of our model. I think whether it's been successful is a lot of people say, "Ooh, free. That must somehow be a competitor. That's bad. Why would you want a free version of things you want out there, right?" Right? We actually see that as that ubiquity is important, right? You get more eyes, more usage, and ultimately, we have confidence that people see value in subscription, and a lot of people then ultimately get a subscription. So, we're actually pretty comfortable with that model. several other things I want to make sure I go through. But again, interrupt me across any of this. So a little bit about the portfolio. Obviously, we started off as JBoss. What we found is people really like the application server, but when you started to go in and sell in corporate context, they were basically saying, look, I need a partner on middleware, right? We need a partner on middleware. And so that means we need a suite of products. We need an ESB, and we need a portal, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, over the last 5 years, we've really built out I don't want to say complete because middleware is always kind of blurry, but a relatively complete stack of things that kind of make up that JBoss middleware portfolio. And the reason people like the Alliances of the world or the Barclays of the world can say we are globally standardizing on JBoss is, when they say JBoss, they mean the whole thing is, there's a suite there, right? That we can meet the vast majority of their needs, and the little places where we don't have something they can fill in, but we have messaging, and we have an ESP, and we have a portal, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we continue to build that. We continue to, build or acquire in those various areas. And for us, we think first about community. So if there's something great out there that we can jump on and just contribute to, that's great. A lot of these things, like we bought a company called Fuse last year. I can talk a little bit more about that. So a lot of interest around Camel, and so many of the developers of Camel were at Fuse. It made more sense to buy it than to try to hire 25 maintainers. And so, sometimes we buy into communities by buying the companies. Sometimes we just hire, like OpenStack, we hire into it. Other things will start, like the OpenShift effort around that. Our intention is to continue to kind of fill out that portfolio. I think we have most of the major areas covered now. You get kind of the ones on the margins, something like, Infinispan, our enterprise data grid product. That was a little bit just some customers thought the technology was cool. We got a few developers involved, and just kind of one day some customers said we really want support, so that became a product. That wasn't kind of planned. So these things happen multiple ways about how things go from being a project to a product. But in terms of kind of the major kind of integration category, so around the ESB and BPM and those areas, we're investing pretty heavily to try to build out a portfolio. And hopefully those are things that you'll find interesting. Fuse in particular, I was told to kind of address that. So I don't know if you guys are, I'm sure, probably more familiar with Fuse than I am. A very kind of lightweight ESB solution, and the thing that we continue to say is we're continuing on with SwitchYard and the other things that we were doing in a more heavyweight enterprise type version, but there's so many applications where Fuse actually just works and developers want to use it that we decided it'd be a great thing to have in the portfolio, but we continue to develop against our original roadmap. And we'll probably call it one integrated product, but it's basically two heavyweight, lightweight kind of models all in one thing. We acquired a company called Polymeta for business process management. There really, frankly, wasn't an open source when we looked at it, and he said, well, do we start one? And he said, well, how long would that take versus acquiring one and open sourcing it? So that's what we're doing with Polymeta. I don't know if we get dates, but again, we'll better hang out by the end of August.
What's happening with
my understanding is JPBM continues to move forward. We're going to integrate some of the features from Polymeta into it. It had some really good workflow GUI type ways that you interact with it, which you want to integrate in with JBPM. But again, now we're starting to get to the extreme edge of my ability to really talk about that. I can get back to anybody again, just email me if you want more detail on any of this stuff.
The core engine continues, the BPM engine continues.
Yes, yes.
And it's layered on top of the Polymeta. A lot of cool, really nice, as you said, GUI activities that make it far more approachable to a lot more people that GUIfied aspect. But the core engine.
But the engine's the JBPM engine, yeah. So we'll continue to look at those things. If you think there's some cool technologies that we ought to commercialize, also let me know that too, right? It really is a mix of kind of top down, hey, there's a project that's successful, let's jump on to, again, I use the fitness band as the example of something that's kind of bubbled up. Messaging, I will say, has been a little bit more of a, okay, how do we put the messaging things together? Given that we actually had a messaging product, and Fuse did as well. But ActiveMQ seems to have a lot of traction. We have a lot of customers out there, and so we're really excited about having that in the portfolio. I can't give you the whole details of exactly how what's happening with AMQP and our implementation of it, C and the broker and all, but if you want to know that, I can get back to you on that. But I think we've decided that actually the Fuse stuff has a lot more market traction, so we're really excited with ActiveMQ and what they've been able to do with it. What are a few other things?
So today, if you look at the overall outlook of how things are going, the keywords that we hear all the time is cloud, mobility, and retail.
Yes.
So in that context, how do you see the JBoss related products fitting in to cover the entire spectrum?
I'm glad you said that. That was my next thing on the list that I wanted to walk through is what the kind of priorities going forward. And I'll sort of kind of answer because they're in there, but number one, which is related especially around both mobile and cloud, is continuing to leverage the lightweight nature and the modular nature of JBoss. So as you think about whether it's the embedded space or whether it's just for smaller form factor type products, we're starting to get much more interest in the JBoss portfolio because if you look at the alternatives, for any type of constrained device at all, JBoss is the only full-featured kind of alternative out there that you can get on a constrained device. So kind of lightweight, embedded, thinking about that, clearly part of the roadmap. Mobile, it's like the number one priority, but I don't have a strategy for you. It's like, in all seriousness, this is one where I think we continue to struggle with how we make sure we address the mobile space in a way that's kind of very, very open. We'll clearly make sure that we make our products work well with the various kind of in-user device development frameworks. Apparently we're working very closely with PhoneGap, was bought by Adobe. Some of the other things out there to make sure we work well with those. The struggle really with those is, do you pick one, right? So you can offer a very holistic solution, or do you say, let the 1,000 flowers kind of grow on, do people want to use PhoneGap or Accelerator or this or that? Let's make sure our infrastructure works well across those. But thinking about messaging in that context, these are all things that are actively churning now. And again, as I said, it's number one on the priority list, but we frankly hadn't figured out exactly what our strategy should be around it. So it's what we want to say we want to do and have as a common layer versus where we want innovation to flourish and be interoperable across. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts around that. They're major pain points.
So that is just very, very fast-paced, quickly changing. I mean, you take a phone like this, it didn't exist a couple of years ago. The technology was there, and I mean, this is a duo core, and the HTC One is a quad core, and they're going to be 8 core in another 2 years, and Moore's law is going to keep the process moving forward. So you got quite a challenge there, trying to find a product mix that will appeal to your customers, in this rapidly changing.
No, exactly right, and that's what we continue to struggle with. It does. So we all agree it's number one priority, but it's hard to actually get it kind of nailed down exactly. So where should what we do stops, and where should we be working with others start, right? Especially when you kind of get towards the end device, and then how far back into manageability do we want to go?